Hi, I'm Jen Rogers. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're here with the head of Prudential Financial's International Businesses and Global Investment Management, Andy Sullivan, to talk about ways companies can thrive in the current climate. Andy, thank you so much for joining us. The current climate, I mean, it kind of goes without saying right now, it is not an easy one. So, what are some of the challenges that the financial services industry faces today, really as it transforms to meet the needs of its customers and clients? What are you hearing? What are you seeing?
Well, first, Jen, thank you for having me. It is great to be here with you. Yeah, I would tell you that this has been one of the more volatile times in my career to navigate in the financial services sector. And I would probably go to a couple things. I mean, you won't be surprised that the interest rate volatility and the market volatility is right up there as really producing a hard environment to navigate. Um, we run one of the largest fixed income shops on the planet, and we also are in the middle of the worst bond market in the history of the country. So that obviously is a lot for us to navigate. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about geopolitics. Obviously, as a global company, with now multiple wars going on, that creates a very turbulent environment for us to operate within. But I would say the other thing is around the customer. I mean, around the entire globe, the customers are changing. They're more pressured than ever from an inflationary perspective and their ability to buy and purchase products. From a customer experience, rapidly the demographics are changing, the customer behaviors are changing. So there's a lot coming at the financial services sector for us to deal with right now.
As somebody that's been around the business for a long time, I'm curious what you think is different than, say, 10 years ago. I mean, you've unpacked a little bit of it, but really, look, we have dealt with, interest rate issues before, geopolitical issues before. What is it right now that is making it such a challenge?
So I might hit three things. And it's three C's: customers, and really within our own four walls, company. So competitors in the financial service space, we're seeing candidly emerging or coming together of parts of the industry that used to be very separate. So private equity has really moved towards the insurance space, which has really started to change the dynamics of our business. And candidly, it's given us a whole new set of competitors. Within the four walls of the company, we now have four generations in the workforce, four generations in the workplace. And those generations are radically different from each other. I have four children ranging from 20 to 30, and they're different generations from each other. So dealing with that, from a how do you motivate those employees perspective, and then customers, which I already mentioned. I think we often forget that the iPhone was only invented in 2007, right? And we all think it's been here forever. The pace of change around mobile and around AI and generative AI has just really taken off. You put all that together, and it really is a different environment than even just a couple of years ago.
I mean, yeah, when you set it up that way, it definitely it feels that way, and it's good to know that I'm not alone in feeling that way. So let's talk about some of the cultural and regional differences, both from the customer lens that you were talking about, but also the employee one. How should companies balance traditional norms when retaining and attracting talent and customers amid what you've set out is this changing landscape that's kind of shifting under them all the time?
Well, I think it's very challenging to be a global leader, first and foremost, as a company. But as I've traveled the world, and I'm new to my role, and I've been in the role since January, I literally have done a different continent every single month. What I will say is the needs of people are the same. People want to take care of their families. They want to save for retirement. They want to protect themselves against illness and injury. So the needs are the same. And oftentimes the capabilities and the product chassis and the like are the same that you can leverage. But every culture, every environment does differ. So, we think to be a global leader, you have to have this secret sauce of what can you leverage, but then being really careful about not trying to use a cookie cutter approach, because the degree of culture is mobile oriented or non-mobile oriented. And it's funny. People often think the United States is very mobile oriented, but go to Africa. Africa is much more advanced from a mobile perspective than the U.S. is. So you really then need to get into what are the cultural norms, what's standard in the local geography, and what can be leveraged. But it is challenging. You need to get that right.
I mean, that really does bring the difficulty level up. And as somebody that's traveling the world, going to different continents every month, I mean, you see that demographics are really changing around the world. Just that example from Mobile First in Africa. New consumers are demanding new experiences and solutions, though, I would say, really across the board. So, how do companies attract that next generation of the clients and customers, but you still also want to retain your recognizability, right? Your consistency, your loyalty that your company has built up over the decades. So, how do you have those two compete but be successful?
So first and foremost, I think the most important thing is to have a diverse workforce. Wherever you are, if your workforce does not reflect really the customer base that you're trying to attract, you're in big trouble. So we've spent a lot of time trying to really bring in diverse opinions and diverse talent so that our workforce is reflective of the customers that we're trying to attract. Because otherwise, we can't relate and we can't do what we need to do. Um, from the perspective of once you have that diverse workforce, you need to test and learn, right? The customer is changing so rapidly, and I mentioned, my youngest versus my oldest. You really need to serve people where, when, and how they want to be served, and that's different from a millennial versus a baby boomer versus a. So you need to test and learn and adjust and evolve, because if you're not, you're going to find as a company you get left behind.
I want to talk a little bit more about the technology angle here because every day we see new headlines about technology. I would say specifically about generative AI. Anytime you pick up a paper, read news online, look, it's all about the user experience or UX going to a new level. So, whether it's in speed, in customization, in accessibility, how can companies leverage all these innovations that we're reading about to meet people where they are?
Well, I often joke that if you really want to get a pop in your stock price, you just have to put a .ai at the end. It used to be a .blockchain, now it's .ai. You still need to understand your value proposition as a business and what the secret sauce is. Why do people buy your product and service? And then use the technology to really drive and enable that. So I'll give two examples, right? When you think about the insurance side of our business, it really is about making the process to acquire the insurance very easy, and then making the delivery of the promise. So when there is a life event, making the delivery of that claim very seamless and very easy. So we've used technology to. I'll use the example. We have a relationship with Mercado Libre in Latin America, where the purchase process all the way through policy delivery is completely seamless and is digital end to end. As far as delivery of the claims payment, we've now had that process on average to be less than an hour, right? So you really need to lean in and use technology to make the value prop hum. On the asset management side, it's all about investment performance. So how do you use data and AI to get a differentiated approach to investing and make sure you then outperform the benchmark and get a different investment performance? So you have to use the technology to really reinforce the value prop.
Outside of technology, what other trends in the financial services industry are seeing that impact and how companies can expand access here?
I missed your question. Can you give that to me one more time?
Yeah, the other trends in the financial service industry that
Oh
are
yeah.
seeing that impact, especially around, sort of expanding access and, broadening the pool here.
Yeah, so I'd say there's different things depending whether you're talking about the insurance side or the asset management side. So clearly on the insurance side, there's a lot of the products in the industry have always been aimed more at the mass affluent and up. And I think there's been a lot of work on how do we design products that are simpler, that really care for the mass markets around the world. And that Mercado Libre example I was giving you, That product is a very low face amount term insurance product. We also sell very supplemental health, so aimed at the needs of the mass consumer, but also presented in a way through a platform that you can reach that audience. Because candidly, the financial advisor community does not reach that audience. When you talk about the investment management side of the world, I talked a little bit about the convergence of private equity, but there is a lot of work underway on how do you take the private alternative world, so private credit, real estate, and really find a way to democratize those offerings so that the average investor can actually partake in those investments where they used to be reserved for the more affluent and the wealthy. So lots of techniques and tools to try and actually meet the needs of a wider audience.
How quickly do you think some of these changes are going to take place as you're trying to deploy all of this?
So, it's always hard, not having the crystal ball of exactly how fast will this stuff occur. The problem is if you're not testing and learning, and because it's unpredictable, you can miss it, right? So I think the biggest mistake you can make is to try and time it of, well, it's not going to come for 5 years, so we'll wait and then we'll invest. You have to be actually seeing how the customer behavior is changing, and how that purchase behavior actually starts to accelerate. So I would actually tell you, I think it's a little bit of a fool's errand to try and predict it. You just better be out in front of it as far as investment and testing goes.
In terms of that testing and people changing their habits, right? You have the company, as you talked about the C's, you got the company, and you also have the customer. Who's easier to manage? Who's like more ready to adapt? Are they both a challenge, or is one harder than
I,
the other?
I would tell you, I think the customer is generally out ahead of us. Well, first of all, without a customer, there is no business, right? So the customer needs to be the center, but they're often out ahead of. It's funny, people will adopt things faster from a customer lens than they will from an employee lens, as far as technology goes. So I think the internal change management is often harder than trying to stay out in front of the customer.
And what's the secret there? I mean, what is how do you do it?
So there is no secret. It's a it,
Shoot.
it's a daily effort. But I think the two things when you're managing the company comes down to, I believe it doesn't matter what business you're in, your differentiator is your talent. So you have to find the best and brightest talent and make sure that best and brightest diverse talent is in all the right seats. And then it gets down to motivation, right? Do you lead the company? Do you run the company in the way where people are motivated to go the extra mile, are really motivated by purpose, motivated by their teammates, and don't just clock in and out. They're really trying to go above and beyond. Those are the secrets, but it's much easier said than done.
You talked about this a little bit earlier. It's getting this diverse workforce in place, but then also it's this retention, and you're doing this really globally, right? You have different cultural norms, you have different countries. So when you're doing this globally, how do you motivate people? How do you keep people engaged to stick around? Because you can put the perfect team together, but you need it to last more than a month. How do you do that?
Yeah, so it really gets down to values and culture. First and foremost, being leading with your purpose and leading with your values, because that resonates with top talent. They want to do more than just come in and get a paycheck and do a job. They want to have a purpose and they want to feel a values alignment. And then, candidly, it's the culture that you said, and we have a very collaborative culture. I've often said people quit their managers, not their job. So you need to make sure you have a culture that is collaborative, that has the right leaders, that set the right tone, and that's not different culture to culture. That is really similar around the globe. I mean, leadership is universal.
So we're talking about evolving, right? You also want to be at a company where you feel you're moving the ball forward, right? Whether you're working there or you are a customer, you want to think this is improving, this is on a track. So, what is the biggest hurdle for companies in this effort to evolve? Because it's like you don't want to just evolve for the sake of moving forward. How do you make it meaningful, and how do you overcome whatever hurdles you think they are?
I think the greatest hindrance, it's going to be different in flavor company to company, but it's always culture. And there are many, many good things about a company culture generally, and I've worked in multiple places through my career that really fuel success. But there's also parts of the culture that actually are hindrances and hold the company back from success. And the reality is, the talent selection process tends to reinforce the way a company already is. So I'll give you an example. We're a very collaborative company. We tend to hire and attract extremely collaborative people. The flip side of that, of collaboration, is consensus and too much consensus orientation. So finding out the parts of your culture that actually hold you back and finding a way to retain the good stuff and change the stuff that's holding you back.
So, what are your tips for leaders out there to figure out what those pieces are that are holding them back?
Well, I think most leaders probably, if they've been in a company and in a culture long enough, they get a pretty good feel of what led to the success. And there's no simple way of going about culture change. It's behavior. They have to identify that set of things, like we're too slow, or we're too consensus oriented, or and then get very explicit on we're going to go from A to B. So as an example, we do too much decisioning by consensus. So we're going to go from broad-based consensus decisioning to much more clear single-point decision making. So leaders, and I think the way that you figure out what you need to change, you talk to people. You spend time in the businesses, you spend time on the front lines, and you really, through authentic leadership, find out what's working, what's not working. Oftentimes, the things that need to change, the frontline employee base know exactly what needs to change.
And I know you wear a number of different hats. So, is it different by sector at all, or in terms of the work that you do, or is this universal?
I would say there are slight differences on like what motivates people and what type of people are attracted to insurance versus what type of people are attracted to asset management. But the spending time with the teams, with the people, learning what's working, what's not working, what do we need to change. That process is the same, but there are subtle differences in the type of talent that are attracted to different sectors.
So, for a takeaway for the audience, just, we've covered a lot of ground here, but just the basic steps or consideration that leaders should be doing or thinking about as they look toward taking their company in the future and evolving and changing. Your number one takeaway.
Can I give you two?
Sure, I'll even take three.
My number one is the customer has to be at the center. I am a deep believer when you care for the customer, you will grow. When you have a differentiated experience for that customer, you will grow. So that's number one. Number two is every single company is about talent, right? So at the end of the day, it's about how do we attract the best talent, motivate that talent, and retain that talent. If you focus on customer and talent, you'll be successful over time.
And should people be prepared for this to be hard work?
Yes, it takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and that's both physical and emotional.
And where is the physical energy? Is that just traveling around the globe? Like, do you have to be, do you need to be there?
Yeah, well, and I might show my age in this response. I might come across as an old fuddy-duddy, but I still believe very much in being on the ground, being with the teams, front and center. I mean, I think the hybrid technology is very effective, but that being said, it does not replace personal relationships and being immersed in the cultures around the globe.
Well, I thought this was great to get to talk to you here, but hopefully we can get a chance to meet in person one day. Prudential Financial's Andy Sullivan, it was so great to get some time to talk with you and hear your thoughts on this. Really appreciate it. Everyone else, have a great day. To get back to the main stage, click the button on the left of your screen. Thanks again. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Jen.